The beach. I have mixed feelings about the beach. It's beautiful in the winter when the sky is gray and moody like the ocean, when the sand is allowed to look a little dingy, when the people are gone. The summer beach is too bright. There is no way to escape the sun. Everyone looks so fleshy, and the noise of the crashing waves and endless chatter is oppressive. The competition for a small blanket-sized piece of real estate is angst-producing. There is no space for the mind to wander on the summer beach. The winter beach allows the thoughts to peek out, slowly, shyly, then stretch out across the horizon. I love my mother best at the summer beach. It is the place that I felt the safest with her. She was good at sitting for hours. She did not get bored or antsy. She had no compulsion to go on to any other activity. She just sat, looking, being. When she had had enough of her own stillness, she would go into the water. She would stand up, soundlessly, alone. She did not so much walk, but she would drift, slow, poetic, sometimes pausing for a moment at the water's edge and then just walking into the waves, unbothered. She would pause at where the waves would break for a brief second. Her timing was impeccable. She never got knocked by a wave, but she merged seamlessly into the ocean. She would drift out far past the waves to where the water was calmer. Gentle, small waves that made her bob up and down. A slight, gentle movement. She would stay out there beyond the breaking waves and just float and bob. Her hair never getting wet. She became the ocean in a way. She just moved with it. I would be left on the beach, watching her, mesmerized by how she seemed to float and merge so fluidly. I would get up with a bounce, run to the water's edge, my feet kicking sand sideways, backs of my thighs covered in sand. My toes would touch the water, and I would jump back from the cold sensation. Then I would jump in and out of the wavy white line of the bubbles of the shore, like jump rope. Then skip into the water, lifting my thighs high. There was no seamless merging. My inner terror would intensify as I approached the crashing waves, and bam! I was taken down. I would roll back to the water's edge, hair full of sand, eyes blurry from salt, and then start the entire process over again. Finally, terrified, exhausted, accomplished, I would get past the breakers. I would spy my mother, and she would still be so far away. I would pause here to wrestle with my choices, keep swimming, alone, deeper, and farther into the unknown, or go back into the breaking waves where I'd be knocked down and dragged back to the shore with the little toddlers and their buckets. She did not see me, ever. She was not waiting anxiously for me to get to her. She did not turn to shout out encouragements. She was not worried that I would drown or be swept away. She just drifted farther and farther, lost in her own meandering mind. Sometimes I would turn back, the distance between us too great, the water too deep, my courage depleted, bested by my fears. And then there were times when I would steel my nerves and risk all my security to make it out to her. That's when she would turn to me, finally, when I was about a foot away. She would realize I was there and turn smiling. Her eyes would be shiny and bright. Her smile would consume her face. She was happy. She was really happy. I would want to cling to her, but I knew better. I would just kick my feet to stay afloat, dog paddling, staring at her pretty face. I could not stay out there long. It was hard work getting out there alone. It was tiring reaching my mother. I knew she would not return to the shore with me. Once she was out there, it would be dusk until she came back in. She would just keep drifting ever so farther away as the day dragged on, farther and farther, more difficult to reach with each passing hour. The seasons passed and family vacations ended. The memory of my mother was folded and packed away. Then, one college summer, my siblings, cousins, nieces and nephews, mother and aunts all packed into the cars and headed to the Outer Banks together. My family is loud, drunk, and high. They laugh a lot. I'm half of them and half of me. Me is quiet, contemplative, alone, intimate, reflective. I move between these two worlds. At one point, sitting alone on the beach, while everyone is cracking open cans of beer, smoking, playing music, kids run around, and an endless stream of chaos feeding the seagulls, I find my own little corner of the world, separate, apart, sitting alone, drawing in my sketchbook and reading. The children are getting louder as more seagulls come. They throw chips in the air, run, and try to catch the birds, who take off immediately. I am immersed in my own thoughts. Slowly, my cousin Michelle comes over, sneaking up behind me. She sprinkles the contents of an entire box of cereal on my head, and the seagulls rapidly descend on me. An entire flock. I'm surrounded, and when I suddenly jump up, they are startled and take off into the air, almost in one motion together. Everyone is doubled over laughing. Fuck it. I walk over and ask for a cigarette, a beer, and a bong hit. Another day, playing with the kids in the sand, a guy about my age strolled by. He had blonde hair. He looked very preppy. He was handsome in the way that I find a bit boring. He looked like an average lacrosse player. Not really what I would pursue. He had been watching me play with the kids as he walked up the beach. He seemed friendly enough. My cousin and aunts descended on him. He joined our group, and we spent the day together. He played with the children with me. We built sand castles, threw balls and frisbees, ate snacks, chased birds, and splashed around in the shallow part of the ocean. The children got tired, and we ran out of food, having given most of it to the birds. We packed up to leave, and he asked if I would meet him again in the evening to walk on the beach. I agreed to. In the early 90s, the Outer Banks was less densely populated. Large houses were still cropping up, but it was mostly sparse, especially as you went more south towards Hatteras. Families dotted the beaches during the day, and there was a sense of expanse and privacy. People were not so on top of each other, unless, of course, they were sharing a house together. After an evening of being with my family, my sister and cousin, making fruity daiquiris, the kids bopping around the house like pachinko balls, and then finally settling in to watch TV, I went out to meet up with my new acquaintance long after all the families who walk along the beach had followed the bright light of their flashlights back into their vacation homes. We walked together for some time, me and this guy whose name I don't remember, up and down the dark, deserted beach, just talking. But there was a sense of strain between us. I was mildly uncomfortable, but attributed that to just being alone with a boy. We walked along. It was low tide, and the shore was far from the houses. The houses were dark for the sea turtles. We were alone, isolated, sitting together at the water's edge. He began to tell me how he had killed a girl, drowned her, in the ocean. He described this in detail, holding her under the water until her body stopped moving, how her arms and legs wiggled and fought, jerked, then ceased moving, her hair dragging across his arms. He lacked tonal quality. It was flat. As he worked through the story with his words, I realized that this was not an opening up and sharing of an experience. It was both a confession and a cautionary tale. What was held in the air was this: you are next. My mind was now working in slow motion and overdrive simultaneously, taking in the pacing of his language, tone, the proximity of his hands to my body. One misstep with my words, and I would be held underwater too, my lifeless body dragged out to sea, then washed up miles from where I was. Fuck. I was stuck. There was no one out. There was no place to hide. I calculated my options. I slipped into the most empathetic version of myself, softening, alert, luring him into a space of no agitation, compliant. I was horrified by the images that were flooding my mind, but what made it most sickening was when he talked about the intentionality. He was unsure about how much of the process was intentional on his part. He was floating in space, disassociating, held in the space of that moment that drifted and dominated the present moment. I was going to die. I was likely going to be raped and killed. I was definitely not going to live if I argued and didn't affirm. I was not fast enough to outrun him, not strong enough to win in a physical fight. Unarmed, useless, I listened, frozen, just moving with him through his story and allowing myself to be taken along in this moment. There was an understanding. Something deep inside of me knew that if I allowed myself to be an extension of his ideal, then he would let me live. I quietly, tenderly, passively let him lead me into the dunes. He lays me down, kisses me robotically, undresses me without passion, touches my body with rote performance. I am no longer in my body, having completely retreated into my head by the time that he pulls off my panties and enters my life-lacking still body. I am wanting and waiting for it to be over so that I can know if I get to leave or not. Eventually, I am released. It is late, close to morning. I walk back alone, baffled, wanting to look over my shoulder to make sure that I am not being followed. But most of me prefers not knowing. I am defenseless. Keeping my eyes forward, at least I have hope. I take a long and winding road back to the house. Everyone is asleep when I get back. The house is quiet. I walk into the bathroom, take off my panties, and throw them in the trash. It's over, and I no longer like the beach.